We're live on Facebook. Hello, everybody. I'm Love Coach Scott Katamas, and it is October 8th, 2021. And this is, well, it's not really straight talk this evening. This is queer, poly, beautiful, weird is lovely, everything you can imagine that's not straight talk. I'm the straight person who will be meeting all the weird, wacky, wild, poly, kinky friends. So welcome. We're gonna have a really fun time, a really, really fun time. And I know that my partner Trish is kind of pulling it together. So while she does that, I'm gonna introduce my friend. You've seen her before.
I'm right here.
Are you happening? Are you like good? There you are.
I'm happening. I'm in real and I am coming.
We so
Mount
love
St.
Trish,
Helens.
but you're also
Yeah,
it's not good. But try again. I'm going to put the spotlight on my wonderful kinky poly partner Trish.
Hi. How are you? Can you hear me?
That seems better. That's better.
Oh, good. So I'm coming to you from Mount St. Helens from the bottom, just right now.
How has your trip been?
Amazing. It's been really lovely. And it's cold. It's 46 degrees.
Wow.
Good thing I have a really furry, cuddly, delightful little boyfriend named Mr. Winston Wolf.
And
thank God.
Winston's now turning into a popsicle.
Barely. Yesterday it was 36 degrees and we moved from the tent to the car because it was so cold. Wow. In Mount Rainier. We were like, okay, it's cold now. Back to California we come.
Well, it's great to have you. Glad you made it. And I do want to introduce Camila. Camila is an amazing coach. She's somebody that has come through the Love Coach Academy program. Camila, I'm going to let you introduce your friends, Blake and Brianna, and tell us a little bit about Flourish Coaching.
Sure. Thanks for having us, Scott. Hello, everyone on Facebook and all other channels where we are coming at you live. I'm really honored to be here this evening, and I have with me two of my dearest friends, Blake and Brianna. There they are. This is Blake Zealer and Brianna Kribeir, and we are coaches in a program called Flourish. And Flourish was birthed from Brianna's world of Sacred Sexuality Rising, and you can go to sacredsexualityrising.com as well as Sacred Sexuality Rising on Facebook. And ultimately, all of us are coaches in the sexuality space, and all of us identify in our own ways as poly, kinky, and queer. And we're building a coaching program called Flourish for folks who identify as any of those three or all of those three. And we're going to be talking more about that tonight.
Awesome.
Thanks,
So
Brianna.
Blake and Brianna, tell us a little bit about yourselves.
So I am the founder of Sacred Sexuality Rising. And in a lot of ways, poly, kinky, queer has been part of my identity for a very long time. I think from probably ages 7 or 8, without having those kinds of labels. What I understand now about myself to be true is that has been, I've felt like a weirdo most of my life. And I have specifically felt like a weirdo in the realms of relationships and sexuality. Come to find out that I wasn't alone. What I have really, really loved is that I even just defining these terms, poly, kinky, queer, I found that so many people from the definitions that I work with, which are totally working definitions and constantly changing and evolving as I constantly change and evolve, that a lot of people can relate to this, particularly kinky. You know, things that people like, all of us are weirdos in our own ways. We all have things that once we're really in touch with our truth and owning our desires, so we're all a little kinky. That's a little bit about me.
Straight talk.
And Blake, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Scott. It's really great to be here. I'm having so much fun already. Yeah, what can I say? I have felt like a weirdo most of my life too. And it has been various forms of outcasting and finding myself as just not belonging in all sorts of ways. And it took a long time to really get into the nuts and bolts of like what I really wanted and how that was showing up in my life. And as I got further into adulthood, it was like, like these identities that I grew up with and this conditioning that I grew up with don't fit. And so one by one, I started discarding them and discarding former versions of myself, you know, and really like outgrowing, shedding skins. And I didn't really know from the time I was 7 or 8 years old. I had a much more latent progression of emerging well into adulthood and building up my life according to what I was told I should do and being utterly unhappy with it. And then piece by piece, discovering my polyness, my queerness, my kinkiness. And as I said yes to each of those things, I had to shed another skin and kind of move into a new space of self-acceptance and community acceptance and ultimately aligning with the people and the values that were most authentic for me. Yeah. And along the way, personal development became part of my path. It became a big part of my world. And so stepping into coaching was the most natural unfolding of a reinvention of my career and of my whole life. And really starting out with coaching poly folks is where coaching began for me. So 5 years of doing that has brought me deeply in touch with the journey from the common paradigm that we all grew up in into the expression of one's truth, regardless of the acceptability of it. Yeah. So that's a lot of where I've worked with people is to really just own what they want and build their lives accordingly, build designer relationships from their desires. And here we are.
I think I just want to name that we have these 3 Dalmatians behind us. This is a real background. This is not a virtual background. We did not pick a virtual background, but there are 3 Dalmatians that are featured in the movie Cruella. And that movie is all about being a total weirdo.
That's perfect.
This was not planned or on purpose. We just happened to be an Airbnb that is very dog themed.
I love that.
We're at Grandma's house and Grandma's very, very dark.
So I want to kind of acknowledge the incredible progression. And let's talk about the word queer. I'm 65. And when I was a kid, like about the worst thing you could call somebody was a queer. And so there's a long period where that was a really horrible thing to call somebody. Then there was like this evolution where my gay friends embraced being queer. And actually in 1988, I wrote a movie called Men in Love. That was a feature film and we had $1 million budget. And it was my life for 3 years. And it was just at the start of the AIDS epidemic. It was before they even called it AIDS. They were calling it the gay cancer. And I had a lot of friends that were dying. And so I wrote a movie and we got money and it was 3 years of my life. And once we made it, I wrote it and produced it and co-directed it. I traveled with the movie because the distribution company thought, okay, let's make the pitch. Why did a straight man make a gay movie? And so I've actually, although I am straight, I've been around the gay scene a long time. And it's beautiful how the word queer has been embraced. And then you guys are really embracing it in a really loving, passionate way. So that's all a setup just to ask about your own personal journeys. And this is to all 4 of you. I'd love to hear your personal journey of being afraid of being queer, or whatever other word you want to use, and then embracing it. And what were the steps that helped you to make that transition?
Camila, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I'll kick us off with a conversation I just had last week in Greece. Someone who was in our yoga retreat group was from Germany and he spoke great English. And he was asking me, is it okay to use the word gay? Is that considered, an inappropriate sort of mean term? Scott, you want to switch the camera?
It's on you.
Oh, there we go. Okay. And so it was really fun for him to be tapping into awareness of which words in English are polite or impolite to use. And so I was letting him know that it's perfectly fine to use the word gay. I think it's sort of the most maybe proper, homosexual, gay, there's sort of proper terms. And I let him know that I prefer the word queer and that a lot of my peers prefer the word queer, but that he should really ask each person what term works for them and doesn't work for them, because there's plenty of people that will not appreciate the word queer. So as you were saying, Scott, it's really in many ways, I think there's an evolution over time, which words are more in and which words are out. And queer is a word I've been using for the last at least 10 years. So I've been using it quite a while. But to get to your question, it was pretty obvious I was queer from a very, very young age. By the time I was 3 or 4 and I could start talking, I could start picking out which clothes I wanted to wear and didn't want to wear. And that was when I stopped wearing skirts and dresses. And, you know, a lot of queer female bodied people that are masculine of center like myself have the same story, where at some age in childhood they did not want to wear, you know, a skirt or a dress or girls' clothes anymore. And unfortunately, a lot of people have the story that their mother, father, whomever was raising them made them wear certain clothing to look a certain way. And I was really blessed to have parents that were on the hippie spectrum and on the, you know, children should be able to choose what they want and express themselves how they want spectrum. So I was able to wear only boys' clothes from about age 4 until I hit puberty early on. And so I would say the beginning time that it was a little challenging for me was around puberty, because my body started changing, and then I couldn't swim in boys' swimming shorts anymore because I wore just swimming trunks for years. And then when I started going through puberty, I would wear t-shirts with my swimming trunks. And then 6th grade was when a lot of things changed for me gender-wise. I'd already gotten my cycle a couple of years earlier, so I'd already been in puberty for a couple of years. But for whatever reason, at my school, it was 6th grade where things socially started changing a lot, and the boys would then be friends with boys and the girls would be friends with girls. And up until then, all my friends were boys. And so 6th grade is when I started wearing girl swimsuits, started shaving my legs, started wearing bras, and switched from guy friends to girlfriends, not romantic girlfriends, just friends that were females. So I would say that was the beginning of challenging for me, and not before that, mostly because I had a family that was accepting and me expressing myself how I wanted to, which was basically as a little boy.
So how was that for you in those years where all of a sudden you're having to be with, you know, girls and having to, you know, do all those things? Did you kind of resent it? Was it a fun adventure? Was it really unpleasant?
It was hard. My saving grace was I have an older sister, and so she went through all of that before me. So I was able to take her hand-me-down bras, and I didn't have to have the conversation with my mom in the same way that my older sister had the conversations with my mom. So that was something I was really great for, was sort of sliding on her coattails with femininity things. But I remember it being very challenging to feel like it was no longer socially acceptable for me to present the way I was presenting. And that went up until, well, I was pretty much still a tomboy all through school. And I had a brief period of time where I married a man at age 17, and I was married in a heterosexual monogamous religious marriage from age 17 to 21. So that was a time where I expressed myself more femininely and missed a lot my sexuality of being with women. And as soon as I divorced when I was 21, I went straight to the Castro in San Francisco and got myself a proper adult girlfriend and never looked back.
Blake didn't know this story yet, Camila.
I see your faces. I'm like, oh, you don't know this yet.
Like,
So good. So good.
Oh, beautiful.
Can I share my story?
Please.
Yes.
I don't exactly consider myself queer. I don't really like the term, and I don't feel like I want to label myself in that way. And it's just, I mean, there's some like shyness around that for me. I'm really big in the BDSM scene, and I go to kinky summer camps and all these things, and I just because I look the way that I look, I wasn't queer enough for the queer kids. And so they me out. And I was like, oh no. Okay. I consider myself an estrogen running vag haver. This is really what it like boils down to.
Say that
I just
again
don't-
slowly.
An estrogen running vag haver. I woke up in a body that runs estrogen, and now I have menstruation and, you know, an innie. So yeah, yeah, exactly. Because I know that gender is a social construct along with a lot of other things, and I don't need to participate in kind of a categorization of myself. It's just too limiting. What I love, so I grew up in Montana being a total tomboy. In fact, my mom made a joke when I was in California, maybe like 2008, 9. She was like, oh my God, you turned into a femme here. And I started wearing dresses and makeup and like the whole like, you know, thing. And that's when I became a dom, you know, is really enjoying my like the power of the femininity, right? And so being able to play in those realms and being in the kink scene really has helped me explore my masculine, you know. I remember when I was little, oh, this is super, how graphic can I be, Scott?
Go for it.
Okay, I remember being teased by my sister. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm saying this online. Is that I would pull my labia really, really tight, and I would see if I could pee standing up and shoot out like a dude. And I was like, you know what? Like, I really, even as a child, I really didn't participate because I was like, you know, I can be whatever I want. I'm an only child doing my thing, and I still feel that sense of. I feel that sense. And so when I started exploring Tantra, realizing the unification of the masculine and feminine, it's really just receptive and penetrative energies. And I was like, oh, I can just be. And so now I cross dress and I, you know, participate in my masculine, and I, you know, I'm a really cute boy, just so you all know. I like really cute.
Maybe you'll show us a picture of Christoph later on.
Oh, well, Christopher Lee, shamanic spiritual fuckboy, is an expression of self to try to develop compassion for a particular man that I've dated, like a particular set of men that I've dated since, what do you call it, Scott? The California hot tub tantra?
Right.
Is that what it is? Yeah. So that I sort of fell into that realm, and that Christopher Lee is is an embodiment of that person, to find love and compassion for them. But my actual masculine, my male, is Jonathan Lewis.
Wow.
So that's all a little bit of my experience. I just don't participate because I'm gender non-conforming. I just don't care.
Trish, we should do a show and drag together. My drag king is Mustang. We could do a joint show.
Oh, well, my drag character, his name is Rod Hammer. He's a Russian comedian, and he's into buns, bail buns. So I have this, like, I have a whole set of, I got stuff going on.
Got many options.
Wow.
I
Okay,
can
now
so
I'm gonna
relate to this character.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, I have this 7-minute man actually that like really I get into.
For only 7 minutes, though.
She's very boundaried. It's very clear.
7 minutes. I've made Blake be the timer.
Yeah. And hold down your victim.
Yeah.
Well, we already have a couple of people that want to watch what you're describing. So
I'm
we'll-
sure.
And I'm going to put the spotlight on Blake and Brianna because it's a little bit of a head scratcher, because you're advertising yourselves as being kinky and queer, and you
And we
look
look so
like
fucking
the
wholesome.
perfect heterosexual, you know, millennial couple. So
Millennial, thank you.
Cute.
We're not that much.
No,
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 no.
So
Yeah,
what
well,
gives here? I mean,
appearances can be deceiving.
Especially if we're hanging out with each other, right? So like if I'm out to dinner with Camila, people might have a different assumption,
Right.
but you know, Blake and I can kind of pass for whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that listening to Trisha share about not identifying with the word queer, but then she went on to say all these things that are true for her. all those things that are true for her are true for me, and I apply the word queer to all of them. So it's kind of interesting. Like queer for me was sort of like this beautiful like catch-all of like, well, I'm not straight and I'm not monogamous, and I have a very active feminine, and she is very, very expressed, and I'm just not straight hetero. That was redundant cis white male. You know what I mean? Just like whatever that generic brand was, queer was sort of everything but that. And in the discovery of how subtle queer can be for me and for others, I came to look at couples that appear like us with a more of a questioning gaze of like, well, okay, sure, they could pass for this cookie cutter version of romance, or this vision of what we think of when we think of regular people in love. But if they spend 2 minutes talking to us, they'll quickly get the download that's not the case.
Blake, can you, for our audience, just because it does happen to be sort of an older spiritual group, can you please define passing?
Passing,
because it's
sure.
very specific.
I mean, I can make up a definition. I hope it resonates.
Oh, here. I actually have one. So passing is generally a gender, is a trans conversation around people who can emanate and be seen as what they're projecting or what they're embodying. So a trans man who looks and is taken into society as that is considered passing. Does that make sense? So that's just like so everyone can get on the same page, just in case people were questioning what passing is.
And I think it might even predate that into racial conversations, like just to be a little bit more accurate, with that and like where that comes from, and then has been adopted widely for people that pass as anything that would be more widely accepted as normal.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Thanks, Trish.
Yeah. So a cis man who doesn't speak with a lisp, who just walks into a conversation, isn't necessarily going to be seen as somebody who also likes to have sex with men. Straight passing. Which is something that has been both a privilege for me and a form of erasure. And I think that there's a lot of that going on, kind of to Scott's original observation, that like the appearance that the two of us have doesn't necessarily turn heads or make people question what they're seeing. So we're passing for normal, which cuts both ways.
And I think that another piece that's interesting about that is that we just happen to be together tonight for this video, right. But we would have any other time. We don't live together, right? We would have any other time.
You could very well be at Camila's house right now.
I could very well be at Camila's house.
She's mine tonight.
I love it.
And I was living with my partner, who's a woman, for the last 3.5 years, and so most of my exposure of my community, and I did a lot of emotional intelligence, transformational training type of environment, and it was edgier for us to be together all the time, and I think to come out to a lot of our communities, and particularly because a lot of my community knew me as having partners that were men. Because no one was talking to me about my sex life when I'm leading a large 150 people in a room. They're not asking me about the intimate details of my life, and frankly, I didn't share a lot of that because it wasn't about me. I wasn't putting myself out as a brand. It wasn't about me. I'm really there to make a difference in the lives of other people. But if we show up on video together, there's going to be some assumptions from time to time, especially if we just gaze at each other.
Yeah, right.
So here's
on camera so they know.
Here's another question for all of you, all four of you.
You're gonna put my panties back on.
Yeah.
Put them in his mouth or your mouth.
They're right there. Right there.
This is a wild show. It's getting fun.
Just getting
surprise.
Okay, now serious question. Seriously, because it's straight talk, or not quite queer talk. How do you all manage other people's discomfort? And especially, let's just say, other people's discomfort that you care about. I mean, obviously there are people you don't care about at all. But how do you manage when people you do care about, their opinion, their relationship is important to you, and they're fucking uncomfortable with whatever queer thing you're doing? How do you deal with that?
I'm going to give a quick example that my mom, who is a feminist and very liberal and was the high priestess of a coven when I was growing up and had gay and bisexual friends, like I always knew these things to be true in the world. When I, at 35 years old, started living with my female partner, she had a meltdown. She told, like, she was in this conversation that I was in a phase. I just laughed at her face and I was like, I've been loving women since I was 7. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, and I was losing it and thought it was hilarious, but she was actually pretty deeply affected. So I really, I think that this question is deep.
Yeah, it is an important question. It depends on who the person is in your life. If it's your mother or your sibling or your oldest friend, it can be incredibly scary to sit with their feelings. Even just sitting with the question of like, are they going to accept me? Will they be okay with this? Before you share something is terrifying. So much so that it keeps a lot of people in the closet about the truth of their life. The other answer that I have is that I don't spend time with those people anymore. There are people in my life who I was friends with long ago who got uncomfortable about me and around me when I started coming out as queer and poly and just owning who I am. And they fell away, honestly. I lost a lot of friends and gained a lot of new ones who are so much more aligned that it's hard to say that I lost, really. But when it comes to people in your life who you can't just let go of so easily, it's a practice of acceptance, of accepting yourself for where you are and being honest about it, and accepting that they may not understand and they may have a lifetime of conditioning that tells them that you're wrong, bad, and going to hell, or whatever else the consequences are. And that's hard to hold.
I've had a lot more pushback around being poly and being out about being poly than I have about being queer. And I don't talk as much about kinky, although now I do a lot more freely. And I take a lot of joy in talking about polyamory at this point in my life. And it's also been 15 years. And so when I started to lose friends and have people create misunderstandings and stories mostly behind my back 15 years ago, and then for the following 5 to 10 years, I didn't know what to say and I didn't know what to do. And I was in a lot of victim mindset around that. Like I really felt so sad and confused. And the last 5 years, I think this is a big part of why I love coaching around this now, is because I see how common this is.
Yeah.
And my perspective is compassion and education at this point. And I can, and not everyone can. I certainly couldn't, especially for those first 5 years.
That's beautiful. Compassion and education. And that's a really beautiful short answer to a complex question. Camila, Trish, I'd love to hear what you have to say about that question.
Yeah. I recently had an experience with my family that, you were around for it a little bit. So my nibbling, which is my sister's child, is non-binary, and they asked me to use non-binary pronouns. And I posted a picture, the picture of Jonathan Lewis, and as like a way of sharing, like, hey, you can be weird and queer and cool and whatever. You can do whatever you want, and I'll still be here and to love you. And being really promoting that. And
I've got the
my
picture
parents,
right here. So there's the picture, or one of the pictures.
Yes.
Meow.
Which character is this? Which of your male personas is this?
Well, this is actually so I went to a sex party, a kinky poly sex party, as Christopher Lee, because that's where you participate in social dynamics. And I really needed to play this character out. Anyway, Christopher Lee is really lovely. Actually, no, he's not. Jonathan Lewis is way better. He's a nicer guy. So when I called my dad, he had this really interesting reaction. He believes that nonconformity is a mental illness. And I was really, really pissed. I was really, really upset. And I sat with that for a long time. It's just being like, okay, you know, this person was born in the 60s and lives in a different life. And luckily, we live in a more authentic world. Like the world that we do live in right now is developing and cultivating authenticity as a form of inner truth. And so I sat with my father's reaction. He wanted me to post a clarification about my post. And I sat and I thought about it and I was like, I'm actually not going to do that. What I am going to do is leave it as is. And I'm not going to rub it in his face, because that would be cruel. Like if I know that I'm being uncomfortable with him, like I don't need to participate in some aspects of self with those people. In fact, that's called discernment, how we move through. And so I sat with deep compassion and was just like, okay, this person is deeply uncomfortable there, regardless of whatever stories I can make up about their own understanding of identity and whatever. And I just sat there in compassion, like, okay, I love this person. I love them from where they're at. And I can show up the way I can without abandoning myself with that person. But I'm also going to hold my truth and my values in a very specific way. And so I really resonate with Brianna's share about, yeah, it's about compassion. That's coming back to understanding someone else's perspective and being able to hold that. Again, I don't like share, hey, you know, poly kinky queer stuff with my parents. It's not necessary for their reality. When I'm sitting on the couch eating popcorn at their house, I'm certainly not needing to express that aspect of myself.
Mila, I'm going to want to hear from you next, but I just want to read a couple comments from our readers,
Sure.
or our people in the Zoom room. Matthew talked about how in the military, some of his closest friends were still hiding, and it was surprising to learn that they, you know, had been that they were gay because it wasn't safe. Beautiful comment from Lisa. She writes, being and speaking authentic truth is so powerful. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, Matthew, thank you for, he kind of condensed it into, you know, into one sentence there. And certainly want to hear from more of you. So let us know, how's this going? What's coming up for you? Eleanor Joy writes, I'm appreciating these perspectives. They're not part of my experiences. So thank you. And thanks for being real. Thank you, Eleanor Joy. Camila, how's it been for you managing other people's judgments, at the very least, their discomfort?
Yeah, I'll start by saying all the bits that Blake, Brianna, and Trish said have all been true for me in different conversations and different instances. So yes, and what I'll add is from my own family life, when I was young, we were non-religious in my family, and there was a lot of openness around being queer because I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina, and there's an LGBT community there. And my mom was part of a women's singing group, and a lot of the women in that group were lesbians. So it was like pretty normal for me to see lesbians. And later, my family became Muslim, and I became Muslim. And then there was this whole religious overlay that had a whole lot to say about homosexuality and all the things that you hear in Judaism and Christianity and Islam. And then it became challenging in my young adult life with my parents to find that same acceptance and love that I had experienced when I was younger. And I know it was equally hard for them, my parents. And it took me time to really get that second part, how hard it was for my parents. And, you know, here they are learning religious beliefs that say their daughter's going to go to hell if, and they believe that wholeheartedly. And then what do with this daughter they absolutely love? We've been a close family with a lot of honesty and a lot of transparency. I was engaged to a woman in my late 20s, and I remember a really poignant conversation I had with my mom where she pulled me aside and she said, she put her arm around me and she was very serious. And she said, honey, I want you to know that your dad and I have talked. And if you and your fiance decide to get married, we will come to the wedding. And I was like, I get that I'm supposed to be happy because the answer is you'll come to my wedding, but I am heartbroken that it was even a consideration whether to come to my wedding. You know, we've come a long way since then. They're still practicing Muslim and they really love and accept me. And they get that this isn't a phase like Brianna's mom thought that I'll grow out of, you know, it's here to stay. So, you know, do you want to accept me or not? Right. And honestly, how I handle these conversations is similar to what Trish was saying at the end, which is there's so many things that are weird about me that I could be talking about Islam in a certain conversation, making people really uncomfortable. So it's not just queer that or kinky or poly. There's so many identities added to that list that would make certain people uncomfortable if I were to talk about them in certain environments. So to me, it's not exclusive to this topic. It's what Trish was saying, which is being aware of our audience. And for me, it's like there's an amount that I'm willing to say not speak loudly up to a point. And if I'm compromising myself, my identity, my truth, that's the point that I won't go past. I'll speak up. So there is sort of a balancing act for me. I don't need to shout from the rooftops that I'm this and I'm that, and then you got a problem with that, too bad. That's not my style. So, but I'm also not going to shut up and not say who I am and what I am for fear of somebody's discomfort. So there's a middle ground, and I'm always tuning into that and doing my best to read that.
Beautiful.
Yay for calibration.
Calibration.
Attunement. Oh, so sexy. Calibration
Yes.
and attunement. Oh.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to ask another hard question. You know, in the title of our show, we said weird, queer, sexy, and beautiful. And claiming our beauty, really being able to see ourselves as beautiful, is a life's journey. And so I'm curious, and this is, I'm wanting really just sort of your own personal experience of embracing or working with seeing yourself as beautiful. And how does your sexuality, whether or not it's poly or queer, tie into that? Your own journey of really being able to look in the mirror and see yourself as beautiful.
For me, a big part of it has been playing in these spaces of the ugliness, like being able to really sink in and actually feel like, what if I can also see myself as disgusting? Like, can I actually let myself be in this total shadow? And the reason that I'm bringing it to this, we're having Dark Week. Also because I was reading the themes in Love Coach Academy. I was reading the themes of like really being in the darkness around this. And so a big part of this is being able to be in the shadows as well. And I express very light. Like, I think a lot of people meet me and they're like, oh yeah, she's like light and love. She's like pure walking light and love all the time. And a big reason that I can do this is because I have allowed myself to sit in the spaces and really acknowledge, like, wow, where am I judging myself like crazy? And can I sit in that long enough to be able to actually tap into the love that is underneath that and how incredibly beautiful it is? And I would say that at this point in my life, finally, I'm like, damn, you're amazing. Like, yes, awesome, hot, sexy, beautiful. Yes. And there's still moments where I still will start to go in the spiral, but it was so important for me to look at the places where I was really not accepting of myself fully and roll around in that shit for a while.
Or roll around in it as a practice every now and again.
Every now and again.
Your question, Scott, made me think of like several different layers of finding yourself beautiful, right? Like being able to look at an image of yourself or look at yourself in the mirror or receive compliments about your physical aesthetic appearance and believe them is one layer of believing you're beautiful that certainly took a little while for it to set in for me. But what's taken a lot more work is really accepting that I'm a beautiful person down to the soul level, regardless of who I choose to love, how I choose to love, the mistakes that I make, the shameful things that I do, the ways in which I don't show up in beauty, you know, the ways in which I show up as a godforsaken mess who is disappointing people or hurting people's feelings or way out of integrity. You know, it's being able to hold yourself in beauty at those times that I think is much harder, and has taken a lot more work. And the connection, I think, with sexuality and with queerness is that as a result of being on this path of weird, like just feeling all of these weird parts of myself coming through that are happening at the identity level, that I ultimately had to kind of wade through them all, both like claim them and then let go of them. Because to become overly attached to identity pieces is to restrict what you are and to label yourself into some narrow description that other people find digestible, that doesn't do justice to the complexity of who and what you are. And so for me, like it really was more true with poly first than it was with being queer, but both. Those recognitions of my truth, like admitting and coming to terms with that's how I am, was itself a spiritual path, because it forced me to confront all of my programming and all the judgments and all the places and reasons that people might reject me, and indeed reasons that I might reject myself. The programming for which goes back to, you know, pre-verbal times. And I had to look at and touch and heal and love all of those wounded places in order to really come to a place where I find and accept myself as beautiful all the way to the bottom. And it's still a work in progress, you know, like literally this week, I've been working really fucking hard on that. So this is coming off fresh as an expression of like what I really heard in your question, that to really appreciate and cherish oneself and celebrate oneself as a beautiful, attractive, lovable, choosable person.
And this is really the idea of conscious kink.
Yeah.
Right. So like, as we weave this part about poly, we've talked about queer and poly quite a bit here. And this is actually the idea of conscious kink, is that we're intentionally going to these places and kinking them out, finding a place to love them, seeing what healing there is involved in all of this.
Yeah. And getting dark with some of those places that of self-hatred or lack of acceptance or ugliness or messiness or judgment, and just being like, yeah, fuck it, that is me too. And how can you love that? And it can be very kinky. very kinky.
Tatvam asi, I am that too.
I missed that too. I didn't
Say
hear
it again.
Oh, maybe Tatvam asi, I am that too. The understanding of Tantra being the integration of all the parts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Trish, Camila, do you want to share kind of your journey as I asked?
You want to go first?
Sure. So I had parents that gave me a good imprint for self-love. So I don't feel like I had a major conflict of, you know, I'm not beautiful because I'm poly or kinky or queer or any of these identities. I would say where it was most challenging for me was when religion entered the scene. And I know a lot of people have that story. So for me, it was, you know, when my family became Muslim, when I was a teenager and I started practicing Islam at the same time, then it was like, does God accept me? So it was less my self-love and more this idea of this external entity that was in control. And was I going to be loved by that? And that was really challenging for me for many of the years of my 20s. I had a really hard time feeling like I was making a good choice from a spiritual lens to be living in queer relationships. And that wasn't reconciled for me until late 20s, early 30s, late 20s, when I started, getting to the place of it's not about God, heaven, hell, good, bad, straight, queer, all the dichotomies that we're taught in religion. And I was able to really see a much deeper truth of universal humanity, and we're all loved by God. We're all accepted, we're all cherished. And that was the harder part of my journey, was around religion.
How are you doing in present time with seeing yourself as beautiful? Do you find yourself seeing yourself more and more beautiful as time goes by? Or as often as we age, that brings up challenges. So how in present time is your journey of seeing your beauty going?
Yeah, I would say that I've been deepening. Thanks, Blake. Blake just gave me you're hot message. I would say that I have been intentionally deepening self-love in the last couple of years. There was a lot of internal growth work that I did during COVID. That's pretty much how I spent my lockdown, was getting extra healing sessions and coaching sessions and really working on some deep parts. I was working on this whole codependency theme that I've had in adult relationships of my own. So digging deep into the roots of codependency brought me into where I felt disconnected as an infant. And then from that place, I was deepening my self-love. So yes, it's a practice that's very present for me. And just recently I was working on deepening that a lot. I don't feel challenges around I'm not beautiful because I'm aging. That just hasn't been a part of my experience, I could say, yet, or maybe it won't ever be. I'm approaching 40. I feel great. I do feel better and better, better and better, because I'm on that life path of spirituality and growth and self-acceptance and love and community and support and all the things. So I would say it's more and more and more self-love over time.
Beautiful. Well, speaking of self-love, Trish has this show that she does every week, and it's not called Straight Talk.
Oh yeah, you want me to talk about the self-love show?
Or,
Hint, hint.
hint, hint. Well, I'm trying to help you promote there, dear. And also, there's the same question: how you're dealing with beauty,
Yeah.
the concept of beauty.
I'll weave it in. So, okay, I'll answer the question first, and then I'll weave the whole other thing in. I've been really chipping away at social constructs, if you guys haven't noticed, but I feel like social beauty standards are also part of this system of degradation that has been cultivated for hundreds and hundreds of years. It is why white people are more quote unquote attractive. Like, it is part of this systems of oppression piece. To dissolve the empowerment of feeling into one's embodiment and into one's truth. So as I dissolve the really annoying beauty standards of like femininity or masculinity or like, makeup or whatever, like lingerie or whatever that looks like, the more I recognize that beauty is a feeling. It's a heat, it's a fire, it's like part of inspiration, part of arousal of the senses of the spirit, for me specifically, that I see beauty in people's authenticity, in their truth, in their vulnerability, in their darkness, in their just truth, like in them being them. And as I sit with all of these pieces and I start to see that every human is just kind of a messy mess, I'm like, ugh, can I love you there? Like, can I love you in the deep, dark, least attractive piece of you? And that's one of the things that I participate in my partnerships is when they're, I call it, okay, so when I'm a mess or when someone's a mess, I call it being an amoeba, like when they're all like just not contained in yeah, exactly, like they're just like a mess, and I'm like, I can love you there. And that's the place of working towards self-love, is that can I love myself in the places that I judge? And and the places that I judge are really just values that I hold. And, humans are, I'm going to say it, inefficient machines, that just because I'm aware of something doesn't necessarily mean that I can change it as fast as my awareness can see it. How annoying. Oh, so anyway, can I love me in the personal growth? Can I love me in that place? And that's why Don Light and I developed this show called the Self-Love Show, which is, there's multiple reasons for it. One, because you were very much an inspiration, Scott, after doing the mentorship and relationship essentials, and this place of like really wanting tools and the work being able to be like just really accessible for people. So the Self-Love Show is a free tool. Every week we have either I'll teach or Don will teach, or we'll have a guest on to teach some aspect of self-love. And self-love is also conflict with others. How do I move through conflict with others? And how do I get back into integrity? Or how do I deal with, my own inherent racism? How do I deal with all these things and still find a way forward? And so those are pieces for me. So just to say, personal work, like doing my work, is part of self-love. Like it is like sitting in the discomfort and looking at it and choosing to love as an action. And love is the acceptance of what it is. That's how I love myself.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to read a couple more comments and then I've got another question. Matthew writes, so I am you and you are me, and we are inseparably we together. And then he continues, even though I'm straight in my individualistic physiological existence, I'm simultaneously inseparable and one with those who are gay or queer and or any other spiritual existence. So it's only the human construct of individual identity that sadly divides us. We can rise above that, and we are with shows like this. Thank you, Matthew. And Jamie writes, beauty is a feeling, beauty in truth, beauty in messy. Thank you. Okay, so all of you, I think at one point or another, have talked about the shadow side, embracing your darkness. And so let's talk a little bit about that. It's certainly a big part of my coaching, and Camila and Trish have done my course. So, it's a big part of my course. But the one thing I'd like to say, just to set it up, and then I want to hear from all four of you. It's interesting to remember that the earth at all times is half in light and half in shadow. And we are children of the earth. And I like that as a starting point, because it establishes that nature, what we are a part of, has light and dark. And one is not better than the other. They just have different dynamics and conditions, and where we relate to each might be different. And so learning to embrace our shadow side and to look at, okay, what are the things that I have shame around, that I hide, that I stuff, that I keep in the shadows? And that's those parts of us. True love is when we can share those parts with another and not be judged. So the last thing I just want to say is that if we're going to explore our shadow side, it's really important to have good support, to have friends or coaching that can be there in compassionate understanding and absolutely be in a judgment-free zone to make it safe to explore those parts of self. So that's my little spiel on it. And I would love to open it up to any tools or practices that any of you either use or teach for working with the shadow side. I think I saw Trish's finger.
Can I start?
Yeah.
I actually, I try not to use the light and the dark because it has so much implication to it. Again, it creates the dichotomy of good, bad, right, wrong, white, light, black, white, like that whole thing. And to see a person in their wholeness around all of their stuff is for me is really where it's at. I'm 10 years doing Dom work, 10 years in the kink scene, 10 years doing Tantra. And that's where I've come to is like, oh, these people, just because they're not aware. So when I see here shadow, it's just that they're not aware of the conditioning that they're running. So that's why it keeps recycling into their lives. But I don't see it as bad or negative or anything like that. So I think that shifting the tuning around the language that we use around it, or the feelings that we project onto that, I mean, so we've talked about this before, Scott, is that I date in this very particular way. I have a game that I play when I'm dating, and it's called the make or break game, or can I scare you away? And it's sharing all of my red flags. Sometimes I go into a PTSD trigger and I'm going to melt the fuck down, and it is going to be totally irrational. The cool thing about it is that I'm going to be able to speak through it and tell you what's going on, but I'm still just going to be a total amoeba. Or I never put gas in my car. Like, I'll tell you all the things that you're going to hate about it, about the being that I'm running. And it's not a shadow part of me. It's just the being that I am. It's my conditioning. And some of it I can change, and there's other things that I can't. So that's where I'm at. Dissolving just seeing it as the full cycle, the full human, like what you were saying, Scott, is that the earth is half in the sun and half in the shadow of the moon. And that right there is it's a full earth.
Beautiful. Thanks, Trish. Camila.
Yeah, I would share a practice that I call stalking our shadow. And it actually fits perfectly after what Trish said, because it's really about awareness. It's really about bringing awareness to a pattern of mine that is not serving me in the highest. And a recent example for me is realizing in one of my intimate relationships, there's been blame in a pretty strong way going back and forth. And so we've identified like, whoa, this blame game is going very counter to our belief and our practices around being 100% responsible and really owning our emotions and not putting it over there. So it starts with awareness. It's like, I'm stalking my blame. And to help me be aware of it, I've done different things. Like I've asked my partner to say when she experiences me blaming her, like help bring it to my awareness so I can then shift it, because I can't shift it if I'm not aware of it happening. So enrolling someone to help point things out can be really useful for shadow work, because by nature we don't see it. It's in the unseen. And so we want to bring awareness to it to help it be seen. Another way I'm working on that, when I was in a yoga retreat last week, at the very beginning of the week, we made a dedication to, what is this week about? And I had previously made the commitment inside myself to dedicate the yoga retreat to stalking my blame and being really aware of it. So that was something I spoke into a ritual setting and calling in my source and my higher power to help me shift out of blame, because it's not serving my highest.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Thank you. Blake and Brianna, what are your thoughts about that?
I'd love to throw a couple of words into this conversation that I think show up a lot in the conversation about light and dark and shadow and so forth, and that is taboo and trauma. So taboo is interesting because in the constructs of good, bad, right, and wrong that we have inherited from religion and from culture and from 2,000 years of patriarchy and so forth, there is a litany of things that are off limits, or that we were taught are bad, or the devil, or too tempting, or whatever. And some of them have like they have images to them, like Eyes Wide Shut, for example, if you've seen that movie, where it's like it's a very graphic representation of all the things we're told that we should not like, or all the things that are going to send us to hell. And yet there are people who are deeply turned on by these images and by these energies, and by wearing a mask or cross-dressing or being bound up or having their genitals tortured in some way. There's just a million different things that people don't say yes to inside of themselves because it's taboo. There's a block in their programming that says this is taboo, it's off limits. And so all of those desires and all that energy and all that passion and fire is getting sequestered and buried away inside of somebody, and they're not willing to own it. And so I think that there's some really fun things that can be done in with kink in taboo work, where you can create scenes to play out these deep, dark, evil, haunting fantasies that you might not actually even really want to do in real life, but you can even just embody them for a little while and open yourself to a deeper truth of what is in your humanity. And this can actually be, sort of the next step with it is to take that healing modality in the direction of trauma work, where a lot of what trauma comes down to is that you were subjected to a situation that you didn't have consent for, and it harmed you. And a lot of the harm at a basic level was that you didn't consent to it. You had no choice in the matter. Your power was taken. And you can create powerfully medicinal experiences by stepping into a scene that resembles that moment of huge disempowerment from the past that was traumatic, stepping into a scene of your own creation with your own boundaries, where you get to decide when it starts and ends and who's going to participate and how hard they get to hit you or whatever it is that you're playing out. And you hold all the power. And in choosing to step into a moment like that with your power, you reclaim the power that was taken from you originally. And so there's a lot of medicine in the dark. There's a lot of integration that can happen when we step into these scary places.
Beautiful. Well, that's a good segue into kind of our last question and part of tonight, which is learning about Flourish coaching, and also just learning about each of you. And if anybody watching tonight or watching the replay wants to, feels called to get support from one of you or both of you. So, well, I've got the camera on you, Blake and Brianna. Tell us about Flourish coaching. And then I am going to pull up your websites and you can tell me a little bit about your offerings.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks so much, Scott. So Flourish Coaching was born out of what I kept hearing as a calling from the sacred sexual communities, which is to have, it's like there are a lot of relationship group offerings, and consistently I was hearing that people had to transpose what they were hearing in a traditional relationship coaching container into something that was more palatable for what their lives actually looked like. So whether they had multiple partners, whether they had partners who represented as different genders, if they didn't, it was particularly for non-binary and trans folks, that there was a calling and a desire for, like, I'm tired of transposing this. I want to have something that is actually using inclusive language, that is welcoming me, and not just welcoming me because, maybe I'm the token person in that group, and then they can feel like they're checking the boxes of inclusivity, and who this is opened up to. And so not only are we deeply committed to the inclusivity that we represent, even so much as to say in large groups, 8, 10, 12,000 people, there can sometimes be call outs for, like, this doesn't feel diverse enough, without necessarily even knowing what the mission and the values are. So Flourish is explicitly with a mission and value orientation towards poly, kinky, queer. And we also encourage people that are just curious about poly or kinky or queer. And I spoke to this a little bit earlier in our meetup tonight, that I believe really that everyone is kinky. It's just how much we're willing to step in and own our weirdness and talk about it and put it out there, which is it kind of connected to your last question. Is like, I don't see the dark as being unintegrated. There's never a part of me that thinks good, bad, right, wrong with it. It's all just like, great, this is very dense, earthy emotion. It's the stuff that we don't always want to look at, and we don't always want to feel. And so very similarly with Flourish. So Camila and Blake and I make up 3 of the 5 coaches. We also have Amy Tuccio and Erin King, who are brilliant, and we all bring something really special and amazing to this group. So you can reach out to any of us individually. You can keep an eye out on Flourish. You can follow Flourish through sacredsexualityrising.com, and you can send us messages directly to get on the waiting list for our next group coaching program.
Okay, now you mentioned sacredsexuality.com, so I have got that ready, and I'm going to go to your websites also, but here's Sacred Sexuality
Rising.com. Sacred Sexuality Rising.
Sacredsexualityrising.com. I love that I have to agree and consent What is this? Must give up my first male-born child. Okay, got
Yeah,
it.
we're gonna take your babies and
No,
invite
this
you
is
to Polly
beautiful. So now
Kinky.
tell us about this website. And I think this is something that Camille is involved with too. And here's Flourish.
Yeah, exactly. So so that date is actually that's a past date, obviously September 23rd. So we'll be creating a waiting list for our next group coaching program.
Great.
And Sacred Sexuality Rising is a group that started on Facebook just over 4 years ago, and it's grown to just over 8,000 members. And
Wow.
we're pretty selective who we take into the group. So each of those 8,000 members, are people who genuinely wanted to be dedicated and connected to the work of sacred sexuality. And that could be in whatever form that it takes. So
Wow.
it's a lot of practitioners, a lot of coaches, and then equally, if not more, people that are just curious to learn more and to be a part of a movement. That's really what it is. It's to be a part of a movement of looking at sexuality through a different lens. I mean, very similar values to Love Coach Academy from what I've seen and what I've been perusing over the years, as I've been following you as well. And then my personal website is my name, BriannaKribeir.com. And yeah, these pictures are a little blonder.
I know, who's the blonde?
But
Who's
not
blonde?
any lighter. I'm just in the grow out phase, I think I was actually in a darker period of my life when the blonde came out. It's like one side shaved, all blonde. But I do mostly coaching around sacred sexuality, but I certainly work in all kinds of different spaces. So I work with tantra clients, but I've done a lot of executive coaching. I have a blast working with nonprofit management groups, and it's really been all over the place, coaching people around business and their own opening up of their coaching businesses, but mostly how to be your most authentic expression of self.
And her name is Brianna, spelled Briana, and her last name is Kribeir, Kribeyer, or maybe Kribeir is another way of doing it.
You got it, Kribeir.
Kribeir. No, BriannaKribeir.com, and that's where you can learn all about her and certainly also contact her. So Blake, you're up next. I'm going to go to your website. Tell us a little bit about what we're about to see.
Scott, pull me up on Facebook. My website's under construction right now. Social media is the best place to find me. That's been super active for me.
Okay.
I'm really easy to find on Facebook, easy to find on Instagram. Flourish is one of my biggest projects right now. I'm also deeply involved with a men's program called Emergence that is a 3-month journey that we're right in the middle of. It's been a super deep dive and a beautiful exploration of what's possible in terms of bringing men into a new paradigm of life, not just of masculinity, but of integrating their masculine and feminine. My bread and butter has been private coaching and couples work for the last 5 years. So that's what I've really built my business and reputation on. And I'm still available for that. For couples or morestomes, I would love to work with a whole polycule of people who are trying to figure out how they run their thing, a whole constellation. That's a dream of mine. But I work with individuals, single women, single men, on not just embracing your poly, kinky, and queer, but really overhauling your whole life. Because I've come to the conclusion that playing at the margins, like, hey, how do I poly better, or how do I date people that are more my style? We don't get very far into touching on the margins of how you organize your life according to your desires without going into the really deep stuff. And so I've never really gotten very far away from the title of life coach, because it really does apply. Like, as soon as we start asking the right questions about what do you want and how do you want to get there, we're going to run into the stuff that really needs to be loved and rebuilt and reconstructed. And I think of it as engineering, like relationship engineering, self-engineering, life engineering, creating designer relationships. That's my angle.
Beautiful.
So yeah, doing that in a number of ways, and hopefully in 2022, producing another program called Love Thyself, which sounds kind of similar to the show that Trish is producing, which is all about ways to love yourself and accept yourself more deeply. So more on that to come. You pay attention on Facebook, you'll hear about all of it.
Great. Well, thank you, Blake. It's great to meet both of you, and I definitely want to do this again. Let's spend more time together. Definitely.
Yes.
Come visit me. I'm an hour and a half away. I'll text you. Let's do that.
It's a very real possibility.
I would really love that. And you'll meet some really cool people. There's cool people here. All right, I'm popping you on, Camila. First of all, thank you for introducing me to Blake and Brianna and bringing these two worlds together. And tell us a little bit about your coaching. And of course, I'm going to go to your website.
Sure. I wish I could bilocate and show up with you guys in Asheville, North Carolina, my hometown.
Isn't that ironic?
I'm still working on that. I've figured out some things in the spiritual realms, but I haven't figured out bilocation yet. So if anybody knows how to do that, hit me up, please. So my website is one of my websites. I have many hats in the world. My website for this type of coaching and healing work is transformintolove.com. And my last name is Love, Camila Love. So that's fun. And I'm a love coach with Love Coach Academy. So that's fun too. So I love working with folks that are dealing with their sexuality and their spirituality. So the intersection of those two realms is my sweet spot. And I love working with poly folks, like Blake said. So, you know, if people are in a relationship with a triad, 3 people or 4 people, love to work with the whole polycule. And I'm trained as a mediator. So conflict resolution is an extra skill set that I bring into my coaching work. So if you're in conflict in your relationships, which we all are at different times, I can certainly help with communication tools and working with boundaries and working with how to work through conflicts in a healthy way.
Beautiful. Well, I want to say Camila is a wonderful coach. She's brilliant. So I highly recommend her. I've had the chance to work with her and get to know her, and she's awesome.
Thank you, Scott.
Absolutely. Trish, thank you for finding a hotel and a room and a space so we could do the show together tonight on your travels. And are you available for coaching, or is your dance card full?
I'm available for coaching, specifically for people who know that they're codependent or have some sexual trauma. I am working with young people right now, as well as, both, well, all genders. It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
So,
and how would you like people to reach you?
Facebook, Trish Wright Loves. It's easy place to find me. But what I really want to share out tonight, Scott, is the Trans Empowerment Project.
Right.
Because we are talking about trans, kinky, queer, and I think that it's really important. Please go to the Trans Empowerment Project, which is specifically to liberate trans, disabled people of color. Jack Knoxville is an amazing human who's put this together and really supports lots of trans to like homeless and getting their hormones. And if you didn't see the show, go back a little bit. Whenever that was, I can't quite remember, but that was a really powerful show. So please go to the transempowermentproject.org and you can donate there. And that's a big part of my heart. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, what Trish is referencing is we had a wonderful show where we had 4 trans men on the show, and each one of them was just beautiful.
Amazing work in the world.
Yeah, they're all doing really amazing activist work, and we're very vulnerable in their stories. So that's definitely a straight talk episode to go back and find. The thing I want to promote is tomorrow night. You know, I do this wonderful show, Saturday Night Alive, for the Global Peace Tribe. And tomorrow night's show is going to be amazing. I mean, honestly, almost every show we do is really, really good. But tomorrow night is really going to be very high vibe. Shakina and Sananda are the most awake human beings that I've had the pleasure to really get to know. I mean, there's a lot of spiritual teachers out there, and I've met most of them, to be honest. Shakina and Sananda are awake, and they're beautiful, and they're amazing. And so they're going to be with us. And so I thought, my gosh, all right, I want to really bring in some other powerful leaders. So kind of the focus is the next generation of spiritual leadership. And what's beautiful is all of these leaders, they have followings, they're doing well, but they all have the same message, bringing it back to ourselves, awakening the divinity within us. As always, we have wonderful music. Daniel Balone is going to do some Sanskrit mantras, and he's beautiful. Nina Gray is one of our absolute favorite musical artists. Shyla Ray Sunshine, and Robert Haig Coxon, who's an amazing pianist. So we have 4 great musicians, 4 amazing presenters. So join us tomorrow night. Please register. Just go to globalpeacetribe.com, globalpeacetribe.com to register. And once you register, then you can come to the early Zoom room show at 5:30, which is just for members. So that's what I want to promote. And I want to promote Blake and Brianna coming to Asheville. I want to promote that.
How long are you there for, Scott?
I'm here. I leave on Tuesday late afternoon. Yeah. So we've got some days we can work this out. We can work this. I'm going to text you as soon as we hang up.
Okay.
So, and you know, for those of you watching, if you're watching kind of live and now, share it out. Share our show with your friends. And even people that are watching, the majority of you who watch this are going to watch the replay. Welcome. You can still put your comments into the Facebook pages, or you can private message Trish or myself, and we'll respond. Any thoughts or comments that you have. And it's, you know, this show is really a service to our community. So if you like what we're doing, share it with your friends. That's a wonderful way to kind of pay it forward and move things on. So thank you, Matthew, for putting those links into the into our chat box. I'm saving the chat box. I'll send it to Blake, Brianna, Camila, Trish. And thank you for a beautiful evening. Really, really wonderful. Fun. Let's do it again, okay?
Yeah,
Thank you, Scott. Be glad
for
to.
sure.
All right. Good night,
Thank
everybody.
you so much, Scott.
Good
It's
to
an
be
honor
here
to
with
be
all
here
of
with you
you all.
guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.